Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music business, and music production. Today, my guest is composer, engineer, and author Rich Tozzoli, and he's going to tell us all about composing music for television, which you'll find really interesting. But first, let's go to the news, and the big thing is Apple buying Beats Electronics. Now, this is just a rumor as of right now, but it looks like a pretty solid rumor. Beats Electronics is composed of two different items. First of all, it's Beats headphones, for better or for worse. Some people really like them, and usually most people who've listened to other headphones don't. The other component is Beats Music, which is a brand new streaming service. For Apple, this is very strategic. The reason why is they see the writing on the wall. Downloads are falling off very, very quickly. And it looks as if the CD is actually going to be around a lot longer than downloads will be. Surprise, surprise. That being said, they also see that the world is very, very quickly going to streaming. And streaming is going to be the future, if not the future already. So they have to get into the streaming business. They're already in it to some degree with iTunes Radio, but the difference is iTunes Radio is non-interactive. It's like a radio station. You can't call up a song that you want to hear. And Beats Music is fully interactive, which means if you want to hear a particular song by Coldplay, for instance, you can just search for it and pull it up and have a listen. And these are two different animals. So anyway, Apple certainly has the resources that it can get into the streaming market, but it seems like there's a faster way to do it, and that would be to purchase Beats Music. There's some other strategic things that are happening along the way. For instance, one of the things that they get along with this would be Jimmy Iovine. Jimmy Iovine, of course, has been a mover and shaker in the music business for a long time. He's been an executive, a high-ranking executive over at Universal for quite a while. Universal Music, and he's also the founder, co-founder with Dr. Dre of Beats. And of course, one of the reasons why Beats really took off is because of Dre, and it was Beats by Dre. So there's this fashion statement in the urban community. So one of the things that's really in opposition to Apple is here you have Beats Electronics with these fashion accessories that don't particularly sound really good. And you wonder how that fits into Apple, which is very high-tech, which not only is high-tech, it's cutting edge, state-of-the-art in many ways. And it doesn't quite line up the way you would think. Beats is actually a pretty big company. They make more than $1 billion a year. But really, Apple wants them specifically for the Beats Music service. And Beats Music is nothing particularly special. Their biggest claim to fame is curation. Curation meaning they have a number of people that you may trust their taste, and they provide playlists. Whether that's a big thing or not, that's what Beats has been hanging its hat on. And in fact, we're not really sure if that's something that's attractive to a consumer or not. It doesn't seem to be a big thing for a consumer. If you look at the numbers that Beats Music has been, subscriber numbers that they've actually been attracting, they haven't been terribly large. So you have to wonder about this deal. Why would Apple actually want to buy Beats Music? Perhaps they want Jimmy Iovine, who's, again, a big mover and shaker in the music business. Perhaps they think he may help with their licensing problems that they have. Who knows? But this isn't an automatic. This isn't one of those things where you look at it and you say, this is a great deal for both companies. It's a great deal for Beats Music because basically they can cash out for Dre and for Jimmy Iovine. They can cash out. There's a lot of money on the table. Beats Electronics is said to have peaked, so they're getting out fast. Beats Music won't be able to compete with Spotify or Apple or Amazon or anyone else because their pockets aren't deep enough. So it might be the right time for them. But for Apple, you have to wonder what's behind the deal. So we shall see in coming weeks how that works out. Next thing I want to talk about is My trip to Memphis last week. I went to Memphis, and it was fabulous. And any musician out there who's never been should definitely put that on your bucket list. There's lots of reasons to go there, and the biggest is Memphis is rich in music history. And the best part is they have it all preserved. There's lots of museums, and there's lots of things to see there. It's really great. I went there for the Blues Music Awards, because an artist I had worked with last year, Adriana Marie and her Groove Cutters, they were up for an award. So I went down there to support them, and I'm so glad I did because it was such a great experience. First of all, we went to Ardent Recorders, and Ardent is one of the gems of recording studios anywhere, actually. It's been around just about as long as any major legendary studio that you have. And I got to say, when you walk in, there's certainly some magic there. You can hear it. It's there. It's very cool. And I was given a very nice tour by General Manager Jody Stevens. And Jody actually is interesting because he's the drummer for Big Star. And Big Star has been so influential. Their records have been influential to so many bands and so many artists. So it was a pleasure to meet him and a pleasure to see Ardent. Jody also took me over to Stax, and we all remember those great Stax recordings of Sam and Dave and Isaac Hayes. Well, Stax has a wonderful museum that's worth seeing. Not only that, they have an academy as well for kids. And one of the things I saw was Steve Cropper, legendary Stax guitar player and producer and writer, was also teaching there, which is very cool. I also gave a clinic at a college called Visible Music College. And once again, that was very cool, and I want to thank everybody there for being so nice to me. Memphis has a history that you wouldn't expect, and they really know how to maintain that history, and I really dig that. Another thing that everybody has to see is Beale Street. Beale Street is 4 or 5 blocks of nothing but music. There's bars on either side of the street, and every single one of them have some sort of music. Everybody has a good time. I was there on a Wednesday night, which happened to be bike night, so both sides of the street were lined with the most magnificent bikes you'd ever want to see. So make sure you put that on your list. Next time you go traveling, next time you take a vacation, next time you have a project, try to go to Memphis because it's a great place, I got to tell you. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle. I'd like to know what your comments are about the show, what you like, what you don't like, and how I can improve it. So drop me a line and tell me. My guest today is Rich Tozzoli, and he composes music for TV shows like Duck Dynasty, American Guns, Pawn Stars, and many more. He also does commercials for Hennessy and Panasonic and some others as well. Rich has written a number of books, including one that we wrote together called The Ultimate Guitar Tone Handbook, and it's published by Alfred Music Publishing. Rich is also a prolific writer for magazines, and he has columns in Premier Guitar, Pro Audio Review, and Pro Sound News, and I read them all the time because he's a great writer, I gotta say. So anyway, he spoke to me from a studio in New Jersey, and here's Rich. I'm here with the multi-talented Rich Tozzoli, who's a composer, a writer, excellent guitar player, and engineer as well. And you do it all, Rich. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Bobby-O.
First, let's start with the shows that you've supplied music for. I know there's a ton of them on cable TV, so give us an idea.
Well, I kind of got started in the early days of Nickelodeon, believe it or not, working around different shows that needed some cool kids music. And then it led down the path to me being on, Pawn Stars and Duck Dynasty, American Restoration, Fox NFL, a lot of shows like that, just a ton of shows that are currently running on television. Blessedly, some of them become hits, so that comes in handy.
How did you get into it? You said it was from Nickelodeon, the early days of Nickelodeon. How did that happen?
A guy named Tom Pomposello, who was the first creator. Remember the MTV logo? That was him. He was one of the early branders of music television. He heard one of my creative tapes that I had done with a friend and said, this guy's got something. He brought me into the office. I had never done any television music. And that was back in the days, believe it or not, Bobby O, of a Tascam Porta Studio with an Alesis microverb. And I was fascinated with reverb back then. I made the weirdest sounds. I would just like be fascinated with a 4-track. And I made a cassette. That's how far back we're going. And he heard it, and he got me into Nickelodeon. And I didn't go down the path completely from there and just go full-time television. I did a lot of other things in the music biz, and the record end and the production end. But then I really got more into music just in the past few years, where I got on some hit shows, and really now it takes up a huge amount of my time because I love doing it.
Well, how is doing that different from like being in the record end, for instance? And let's just talk from a composing standpoint. You're composing with the show in mind, I guess, or are you not? Or are you just writing music and hoping that it's going to be placed, or do you have a predetermined idea of where it's going?
It's both. It's often like 85% of the time is a predetermined idea. A particular show will need a particular sound. A country show would need, et cetera, et cetera. And then you would need blues for certain shows. Certain shows need trippy music, orchestral cues I was doing the other day, really hardcore, heavy-duty orchestral. Then there's hard rock. Often I have an idea of what show I'm going to be composing for, and therefore I know what direction to take in that show. But then sometimes I often write just to write because I love to write. And I hand it in, and it gets mostly placed, luckily.
What's the difference of composing or just writing songs as compared to writing for television? Is there a difference?
Oh, boy, is there ever. For television, I have to encapsulate my idea into, a minute and a half. And I have to make... It's interesting because you really... when you write with television, when you co-write with TV writers... They know what they're doing right off the bat. But when you co-write with songwriters, they want to make it a 3-minute piece and, an introduction. We got to say a lot very briefly. So I learned to put a strong melody right up in the tag. I would make statements early in songs on television that I wouldn't make in a regular song. Let's put it that way. Don't forget, we're servicing the dialogue. That's our job. So I don't mean that I don't take what I do seriously, but I don't take each song too seriously. I put a lot of effort into it and I make it right, but you move on fast. So there's definitely a difference. I tend to spend a lot more time in the traditional songwriting and thinking through melodic structures, et cetera, et cetera. In TV, get it done quick and make it happen as hard and heavy as you can, believe it or not.
Well, when you say get it done quickly, how quickly is that?
Very quickly. When I co-write, I have a couple guys I co-write with, good friends of mine that are drummers. Believe it or not, I do a lot of live co-writing with drummers. Imagine that. And we sit down, we put the headphones on, we got great amps, everything is plugged in. We write on the spot, create it's generally, I come up with a part with my guitar or whatever. I'm talking, it takes maybe 3 or 4 minutes to write the cue, and then we rehearse it once or twice, and it's recorded immediately. I'm talking 15 minutes, and it's done, including my bass parts and everything. It's speed, on top of mind speed writing, we call it. And it's really fun because your brain doesn't think. Your brain just instinctively goes into, create your parts, do an A, a B, an A plus section, a B plus, a middle break, maybe an intro. I'm like thousands and thousands of cues in, Bobby, so I just got it. I have it down to a science. It's the 10,000 hour thing. I got it. That's what I do.
Does that mean there's not a lot of overdubs?
Very, very few. For what I do, everybody has their own style, remember. But last week on the orchestral cues, I had a great keyboard player, Bruce McPherson, come down. That was overdubs. That was layers of French horns, and we created pads. Blessedly, a lot of what I do for TV, and if you listen to television, it's very guitar-centric. So I'm recording old school, like almost old school rock cues and blues and jazz. And it's like literally it's 85, 90% live. I generally, even when we miss a part, I'll generally take the whole cue over again because it's only a minute long.
Yeah. Oh, there's the advantage of it, sure.
Yeah, it's old school. Then I'll put a bass part in, and maybe, generally speaking, I'll put a guitar melody in. I don't think very fast about it. I make it happen off the top of my mind, and it blessedly works out.
So you're working with drummers, and that means there's live drums. So you're not, or are you programming, or is it all live?
Both. It's almost 50-50, maybe even more towards live drummers. When I work with the live drummers, what's great about that is there's no clicks. It's just, here's the part. Both of the guys I work with, Vincent Moralia and Ray Levier, both have great tempo, blessedly. So we can just get the parts down. They've done so much work with me, they know what to do. It's often just eye contact, make the part happen. It's unspoken at this point. And both of them I set up very nicely with Apollos and DPAs and Earthworks, really good mics, good preamps, Focusrites. Good gear does make a difference on TV, believe it or not.
Really? You can hear it?
Absolutely, without a question, not even a maybe. There's no doubt. Just last night I was watching a show on Discovery Channel that I had never seen before, and I was like, wait a second, that's my music. So yeah, it was weird. And it was a resonator part. And it was a resonator part through an old Gibson amp with a ribbon mic that I literally remember tracking it. And I could hear, I said, I can hear my Mesa Boogie head. I hear there's no doubt you can hear certain things come through that give you tonal change over, I'm not going to say my competitors, but other people that you're on TV with. Just, I have a particular sound. And then I do write with loops sometimes as well. So it's both.
Is there a particular tempo that you're looking for? Do most of the cues fall into a typical tempo, or does that per TV per show?
That's a great question, and it's absolutely valid. For example, Duck Dynasty, I was specifically told to write slow because the talent speaks slow. So you have to consider that while you're composing. For something like Counting Cars, it's pretty quick. It's hard, heavy rock. I'll detune my Les Paul and drop it down and hit it hard and fast. Every show has its own feel, its own tempo. If you listen to a show, you'll really hear a sonic characteristic of that show. And I actually study it. I spend time watching television, not to watch the shows, because some of them are really stupid. But
we won't say which ones.
Yeah. I really enjoy the music that's behind it, and I pay attention to the music that's behind it, and I say, oh, there's an idea, banjo guitar with a creepy pad, that's pretty cool. You just come across thoughts of what's going to work, tempos that are going to work, sonic palettes that are going to work on each show. It's fascinating because it's so different every single day for what I do, and I get to use Pro Tools like my right arm.
How much do you compress everything? Do you have to compress it a lot to jump out or not?
That's another good question. I hit it really hard. Drums I compressed to the kajesus. But I learned so many cues in. I mean, I've mixed so many cues that I got it down. I've learned certain things work, certain things don't. Compressing drums absolutely works. And generally I don't compress the two mix, but I limit it. Something like the Oxford limiter is very clean and punchy. And I approach my TV cues like a record. Every single 1.5 minute cue is mixed to the best of my ability, like a hardcore record release, as strong as I would mix anything else.
So when you say you're compressing the drums and you're compressing them hard, does that mean the typical thing of compressing the kick and snare and maybe the toms and everything else, and maybe across submix as well? Is that the typical thing you're doing?
Yeah, 1176 on the Beyer M160 room mic, for example. You know that trick.
Sure.
I think you showed me that one, to be honest with you, Bobby. That is phenomenal. And you hit it hard, and you really, really hit it. You limit it massively, and it really makes a pointed drum sound and very aggressive. Like I go for a very aggressive TV mixes. And I hear it. I really do hear it coming through speakers on television. And think about this. When you're listening to your mixes often, unfortunately, we're listening on iBuds or an iPhone. I'm lucky that sometimes, most of the time, people have stereo televisions, if not surround sound. And they often mix the music fairly loud in certain spots in some of these shows. So I can really hear stuff very cleanly.
Do you EQ a notch for the vocals, or do you leave that to the person that's mixing the show?
Vocals meaning I don't do vocal.
Not vocals. I'm sorry. A notch for the dialogue.
I do. That's funny you say that. Absolutely. I create a space in the middle I'll pan the bass off to the right. There's a bunch of things I do that I've learned over the years to leave very little space up the middle of my mixes, which is another thing that's different from a traditional record mix.
Wow, you pan the bass. That's interesting.
Believe it or not, it's never failed. Yeah, what I'm doing is just getting things out of the middle and leaving dialogue there. I'll do stereo guitars a huge amount of time. I'll layer stuff in quite heavily. Even if I did that live recording, like I was saying I do, I'll immediately overdub a second pass right off the bat as soon as I'm finished with the first pass, because you remember the part right away. And then I'll build upon that and spread that out wide. I'll definitely mix and EQ and limit and compress differently on a television mix than I do a traditional record mix. Mind you, there's vocals in a record mix 99% of the time.
So you're intentionally leaving a spot for the dialogue. Does that mean frequency-wise too? You might EQ it in such a way where there's a place for the dialogue?
I generally don't think necessarily about that, but if I have acoustic guitars, I'm going to cut a lot of stuff out of them. I would definitely say that a television mix is different than a traditional mix in the low end, because I'm not putting as much low end in the TV mixes because you're not going to hear it. I'll filter a lot of frequencies out down there and punch them up higher than usual. Like a kick drum would be up in the 150 range and the 160 range instead of 120s and 90s and 80s.
Oh.
Same with the bass. Yeah, it's a little different, but I found that it works without question for my particular style and sound.
How about gear? Did you acquire gear? I know you have a lot like most of us do, but do you have gear specifically for writing for television or recording for television?
Absolutely. Yep. A lot of it too. Lots of guitars, resonators, 12 strings, banjos, mandolins, everything. A cigar box guitar. I had a TV producer say, can you do this particular thing? It was for one of those shows about liquor running or something. I can't even remember. It's like, kid, you got a cigar box guitar? Oh, sure, I got a cigar box guitar. I went online and ordered one that day. A few days later, I had a cigar box guitar. I went onto YouTube and learned how to play it and handed the cues in a few days later. I didn't even know how to tune a cigar box guitar. But guess what? They sound amazing. Holy smokes. So yes, the answer is I definitely have a lot of gear. I just bought some, particular microphones, other DPAs that I find are extremely clean and clear on acoustic guitars, and they punch acoustic guitars through television really well. So I absolutely have a lot of gear that's, definitely for television.
So even audio gear too?
Even audio gear. Of course, it's multi-purpose, but I find that tube preamps are not as effective on television. This is just my personal 2 cents. I tend to go with the more, the Grace and the Millennia and super clean, super clear Class A type things to get crystal clear sounds. Because remember, I am hitting stuff pretty hard after it gets into the limiter or whatever. So I want to get the things into the Pro Tools as clean and clear as possible.
Do you mix to a particular level?
I hit it pretty hard. No, I don't do -10, because that's the show's. In other words, the music gets handed in at just at below 0. Then the show comes out at whatever level the show is at, and then sometimes the music is low in the show because of the way they mix above the dialogue, or just the show is low, or sometimes it's they mix it louder. I actually don't really know. I don't pay attention to that end of it. But I hand it in at, record level, for example, pretty loud.
You're an excellent engineer as well, and you have a lot of credits, a lot of great credits, and you've done a lot of really cool things. And one of the coolest things to me was working with Al Di Meola. So give us some background on how that happened. Al
was one of the first people I ever started working with. It was, believe it or not, right in the same time as Nickelodeon. I started doing both things simultaneously back then. I was just working in New York and selling high-end audio gear because I was really into recording at that time. And Al, believe it or not, worked out at the gym I was working out at here in New Jersey, where I live. And I ended up working with him since '96, been on tour from here to Russia with him, did lots of records with him. really came up the chain learning how to record with great engineers such as the Filippettis and all those guys, just watching, observing sessions, and then eventually taking over the seat and doing a lot of sessions myself with him. And I'm blessed that I really have a guitar niche of working with guitar players, Ace Frehley, doing his last record with him, things like that. And there's no question you pick up, as a guitar player, which I am, you pick up a lot from sitting next to the guys like Ace and Al for, days and days and hours and hours and hours at a time. Just in this day and age, just generally the two of you sitting there making tracks at home studios after the big sessions have been tracked or whatever.
One of the things I always found interesting working with someone like that, a legacy artist, was the fact that it was so much more than just, if it's a guitar player, than what they're playing, their instrument, because there's that accumulated knowledge of recording that they've done for so long, and being in the studio and just being, a cat, one of the guys for so long, and that you absorb some of that. You can't just help but absorb, much more than just the guitar playing. I found anyway.
Oh man, that is so true. And you pick up little details here and there. Like, I'll never play like Al, for example, but I'll approach things with a different fluidity that he might have showed me, or something like that, or particular chords or something. And, working with someone like Ace was really fascinating to me because I grew up a Kiss fan. So I had a special, affinity for doing that. It never gets in the way of when you're working because you're there to do a job, mind you. But, Ace likes the mics right pressed against the grill of the cabinet, and you get that real in-your-face guitar sound. I would use a lot of ribbon mics with Ace. I just learned when you're sitting there and you're watching someone like a few feet away from you cutting guitar tracks that you've heard since you were a kid almost, the sound and the style. You watch that. It's in his fingers, it's in his hands, it's in his tude, it's in the way they tune the amp. It's just a very particular special thing that you see. That's why this guy is special. That's why Al is special. They have certain things that rise them above the crop, and you certainly do absorb that. And it's fun to watch it and be part of it.
I did a couple albums with Mick Taylor, former Rolling Stones, and I also went on tour with them. I was the musical director of his band on a tour, short tour, and he didn't own a guitar or an amplifier on the tour. He kind of relied on the fans that would show up, and there'd always be a bunch of guitar players, and they'd always show up early, and he'd find out that, okay, there's no guitar, an amp, and they'd always say, here, use my stuff. So he was using a different rig every night, and some of it was god-awful, I got to say. It was really terrible stuff, but it always sounded like Mick Taylor. It always sounded like him, and there was never a problem. And you just think, wow, it's more than gear. It's definitely more than gear. It's in the fingers. It has to be.
Absolutely. No doubt. And it's fun to observe that, isn't it? You definitely pick something up by learning that and saying, I don't have to have all this stuff. I don't have to have this gear. My sound is my sound. Al's sound is his sound. Mick's sound is his sound. That's just the magic of being a guitar player.
Yeah, and after a while, I think when you first start, I know I did. I tried to emulate so many people, and I would see someone in concert, and I'd go out and I'd buy their gear. I did this with Terry Kath from Chicago because I was a big fan, and I saw he was using a Bogan amplifier head, and it was a Bogan PA system. He was using that for an amplifier head, and I went out and I bought one, and I used that for a while, and I used the same Les Paul and all that stuff, and it doesn't make you sound like him, unfortunately, or play like him. But when you're young, you do that, and as you get older, as you say, you begin to think, well, wait a second, he does his thing, and I have to do my thing in order to, go another step here.
Sure, you develop your own flavor, and that's the beautiful thing about playing guitar. Everybody, even if you're 6 months into playing guitar, you already have a little bit of your own flavor.
When you were working with Ace, what kind of gear did you use? Just out of curiosity.
Let's see. It was a Peavey head, believe it or not. I think it was the Eddie Van Halen head, which sounded fantastic. It wasn't exactly what you would expect with the Marshalls and all that stuff. We did use Marshall cabinets, various cabinets. I bought in my Boogie Mark IV head. We would try out a lot of different things. It was definitely the classic arsenal of Les Pauls, but what Ace also taught me is the Strat and Tele overdubs in the left-hand channel to complement the Les Paul parts. So he had a lot. He was an avid, pawn shop collector of guitars. He'd go when he was on the road, find, be like, hey, look at this, telly I picked up for $200, and we'd plug it in, we'd mess around with it. He'd adjust the pickups. He's good at setting up his own stuff, and it was really fascinating to do that because we're both avid guitar freaks. So it was just fun to work with somebody like that.
So in other words, he does a Les Paul part on one channel, and then he doubles it with the Stratter Telly.
Yeah, totally. That's what I meant by I started doubling my tracks after that on television immediately right after I cut the first part. It was like, oh, listen to how thick that sounds. And so, you just pick things up and you learn from there.
Yeah, that's so cool to be able to do that and to shuffle amplifiers and things like that. I've worked with some guitar players who would insist on doing, all these overdubs, and they'd use the same guitar and the same amplifier. And I go, man, you're not going to hear all this stuff. It's going to be mush, and you have 5 guitar parts that are all the same. They may be playing different rhythms or something different, but the sounds are so close. And, this just goes to show you that's what you have to do. You have to use different gear.
Absolutely. I'm very lucky in TV land. The drummer I was talking about, Vince Moralia, happens to tune and repair a lot of amplifiers, vintage amps. We have a great vintage amp collection between himself and I of Magnetones, Gibsons, and you can hear those on TV because we use them. We're blessed enough to be able to record through a pile of vintage amps, and there's nothing like it. Your guitar reacts differently. Everything reacts differently. It's funny, we use so many different ones that when I'm doing a part, I have to plug into a different amp. I have to learn that amp. It takes me just a few minutes to learn the sponginess, the particular notes you can and can't hold on that amp or whatever. And you really do learn how to play an amplifier, how to make it work for you.
So are you saying you're learning the sustain of the amp? Is that what it is?
Yep. That's exactly right. Certain tubes are going to sustain differently. Certain guitars are going to sustain differently. Les Pauls obviously will sustain a little more to a certain amp. I use a lot of varied pickups too. Single coil is going to react differently. It's going to sound differently on television than a humbucker, which is going to be much more the character of the amp, whereas a single coil is going to be more the character of the pickup. It's really interesting. You do learn a lot when you're doing track after track.
Wow, I never realized that. That's cool.
Oh, yeah. Ace showed me a lot of that too. Single coil sounds over the humbucker sound. Again, that's picking stuff up from the guys who know.
Yeah. So you're mixing your own stuff. You're engineering and mixing your own stuff then, right?
Sure. That's what makes it easy for me is because I'm able to track with the guys, bring the stuff home to my house, and I usually FTP it to myself. I don't even put it on drives. And then come home, mix it real quick with all my toys. My room is tuned, and then upload it to the client. Literally seconds after my mix is done, it's FTP'd to the client, which is pretty amazing if you think about how technology works now.
Yeah, that's for sure. No more FedEx or anything like that.
I mean, it's seconds. Seconds later, the FTP, it's on their server, and then literally sometimes it's on shows days later, which is really fascinating.
When you're doing a show like that, how long does a mix take?
Oh, again, very quick. I have a lot of these. The guys I work with, I have templates for. So it's I import session data, and I've been doing again these so much that I know what works and what doesn't work, and I whale through mixes very quickly. But I know I'm good at it. So I don't mean to be cocky at all, but I'm just saying that's what I do.
Yeah, sure. No,
yeah.
How did you get into engineering?
That was just, believe it or not, Al. That was Al helping me come up the chain in that department, just kind of learn, observe, do it myself. I had one of the early Pro Tools rigs in this area. I was way into digital recording before it even sounded good. And that got me into out on tour and recording with Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Billy Squier, all kinds of quirky acts and cool acts. Because I was one of the early Pro Tools guy. I just got it. I read the manual. Imagine reading a big giant manual. And it was $15,000, $16,000 for 16 channels. I borrowed money as a kid to get one of the first 16-channel Pro Tools rigs. And I literally just dove head over heels into it. And that's been my right arm ever since. And It really does make a difference. The reason I can work so fast, Bobby, is because Pro Tools is an extension of me. It's not, I don't have to think about any of it. It just happens.
Didn't you write a Pro Tools book?
I did. Pro Tools surround sound mixing, we were both into surround for quite some time. I do a little of it now, but really I focus on television work.
Yeah, I had someone call me with some surround questions the other day, and I had to scratch my head because it's been so long. It's like, oh, yeah, I forget how we did that, actually.
You know what we do in this business, Bobby, is like it or not, we follow the path of the income and what makes you happy. So television music makes me happy, and it pays me a very nice income, and so I do it, and I enjoy it, and I hope everybody finds what they're good at.
You've been writing for a long time for magazines, and
yeah.
I enjoy your writing. I know you write for Premier Guitar, right, and Pro Sound News.
Yeah, I had a Premier Guitar column for a long time, and Pro Audio Review and Pro Sound News. That's another thing that I don't take into account, but I wanted to know how they got the Metallica kick sound. And so I made up a story where I called my editor, said, can I do a story on Bob Rock? And I called Bob Rock in Hawaii and learned how to do the Metallica kick. And that's a good example of when you're a writer, you can call people up and you can kind of learn how to do something. And cumulatively, we've learned a lot from talking to some of the greatest engineers in the business over the years and just being with them at the shows that we go to, et cetera, how to EQ a kick in this way or layer a kick in this way or how to get a particular string sound or something. Wouldn't you love to get the string sounds that Al Schmidt gets, to learn from him?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And I've watched him, and it's so effortless to him that you wonder, you watch him and you go, hey, I can do that, but you can't.
Exactly. But that's the blessing of working with someone like that and having his skill set and all the years of experience.
How does Bob Rock get the Metallica kick sound?
From what I remember, it was a peak, a 10K peak, and it was a weird. I think I remember. This is a long time ago, by the way. I'm just using it as an example. A strange AKG microphone, to my knowledge. I remember thinking, "Oh, that's a strange mic." A lot of 10K peak, and I don't think it was even sampling that time. I can't remember. I wish I could answer that more. I just don't recall. I was using it as an example, but
yeah, Well, I did the same thing. With starting with my Mixing Engineer's Handbook, which is the first book that I wrote. And I went, because I wasn't really a good mixer. I could record really well, but, mixing is a completely different, flavor. It's entirely different. And I wasn't particularly good at it. So I went and I knew all the A-list guys. So I just went and I interviewed them all and hoping that some of it would rub off. And it took longer than I expected, but it did rub off eventually.
That's right.
We
can learn from that, and it's a great thing to have what we have at our disposal now to learn things online or however you want to learn. Even me, who's been using Pro Tools all these years, I went online and took a tutorial course the other day on Pro Tools 11 to refresh my brain on how to use particular keystrokes or something like that. You got to keep learning. Having said that, Bobby, I still study guitar constantly.
Yeah.
Because it's an art form that's life deep, and you can learn. I'm studying Texas swing lessons now.
Oh, cool.
Just because, I was noticing on television, I was saying, listen to some of those Texas swing cues. So you go online, you learn how to play Texas swing, and 2 days later, you're tracking Texas swing music.
Wow.
It's fun.
Yeah. Does that mean you're getting requests then? Did someone request that you do Texas swing, or are you anticipating that you're going to get a call?
This is anticipation. This is me expanding my palette. You must always refresh what you're good at. You can't rely on your laurels or whatever worked last week. Whatever works last week in TV probably won't work next week. So you got to keep moving.
Coming back to Pro Tools for a second, are you using Pro Tools 11?
I am. And I've just started to dig into it. I like it. There's a lot of great things about it, and there's a few things I would like to fix.
Well, we won't go into those, but
No.
It's funny because I ask everybody I run into that's doing Pro Tools, and that's most everybody, and everyone is afraid to go to 11 because no one else has. It's a follow the leader thing for the most part. But since you're not really interchanging your files with anybody, or you're not getting files from somebody else, it doesn't matter. You can go to 211 and be okay with it, right?
Yeah, partially. I still mix for other clients, so I do interchange and still work. I was working on Omar Hakeem's record recently, and he was doing all Pro Tools 11, so that was a good indoctrination to sit in there and watch it at work, and it worked very well. It's definitely cool when you do a bounces faster than real time. Is an incredible time saver in the world of TV, and I have been doing that recently.
Ah, so that's a good reason to go to 11 right there.
Absolutely, no question about it. It's I did a whole stems in minutes. It took me, I mean, mind you, my own things are only a minute and a half, a lot of things, but I have to do multiple versions, mix, no guitar, no bass, drums only. So even though it's a minute and a half, I'm doing 6-7 pieces per cue.
I didn't realize that you actually do alternate mixes.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Yeah, because bass and drum became popular on TV just, I don't know, half a year ago, a little more, maybe a year ago. And so I play a lot of bass too. I got an old 69p bass. So I do bass and drum mixes. And you got to do every kind of mix because you never know what the editor is going to need. And I'm a slave to the editor besides the dialogue. So I give them everything they can possibly want to work with out of one cue.
So would you give them like the bass and drums on one mix and then just guitar only on another so they could balance it up?
Nope, they don't want that. They simply want a 2-mix. I'll just I won't give them a guitar only mix unless it's an ambient guitar cue. Like Eventide. I use the Eventide H9 pedal a lot, which is really incredible for ambient guitar work. But a lot of things on television are, if you listen closely to drama shows or crime scene shows, I do a lot of really cool guitar stuff that's driven by like an EBow through an H9, something quirky, and it's just guitar.
That's very cool.
Oh, it is cool. It's fun.
I want to mention here that you and I wrote a book together, The Ultimate Guitar Tone Handbook, which I'm really proud of.
Me too. That was a lot. I learned a lot. Boy, just like anything else, you learn a lot by writing a book. As you know, more than anybody else, you learn a lot by writing a book.
Yeah, and the people that have bought it or have read it have given it great reviews. Everyone's always said how much they learned from it, and that's always gratifying when you hear from people that really like something that you do.
It is. I really, as much as you do, I can tell we like helping people. We like help people learn, spread the information about how to make great records, because we all win if people make great records. That's my thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, you've helped a lot of people today, I'm sure, with what you've told us about the world of television. It was very cool. A lot of stuff I didn't know, and I'm, as always, pleased to talk to you, Rich. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks, Bobbio. Always a pleasure. If you want to find out more about Rich Tozzoli, go to his website, which is richtozzoli.com. That's RichTozzoli, richtozzoli.com. You can also check out the book that we wrote together called The Ultimate Guitar Tone Handbook. So thanks for listening and being part of my Inner Circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, send them to questions@Bobbio Inner Circle. To listen to other episodes of Bobbio's Inner Circle, go to BobbioOwsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go directly to BobbioInnerCircle.com. At BobbioOwsinski.com, there are links to blogs and coaching programs, as well as a sign-up sheet for my newsletter. And also, if you want notification about this podcast, about what's coming up, about what just got posted, you can also sign up for that as well. This is Bobbio Owsinski, and I'll see you next time.